It was an evening like any other, or so I thought. The June sun was slowly setting over the Paris suburbs, bathing the streets in an orange glow. My wife, Sophie, was adjusting the tie of our eldest son, Lucas, while I was trying to fit the feet of our youngest, Emma, into her polished shoes. As we do every month, we were getting ready for dinner at the home of my in-laws, Pierre and Marie. "Are you sure you don't want to wear a tie, Antoine?" asked Sophie, a hint of concern in her voice. I sighed. "You know your mother will criticize me no matter what I wear. I might as well be myself." Sophie nodded, resigned. She knew that relations between her mother and me had been strained ever since I'd left my corporate job to become a freelance developer. Marie had never understood this choice, considering it irresponsible. We climbed into our old Renault Clio, the children sitting in the back with their tablets. The 20-minute journey to my in-laws' house was made in relative silence, punctuated by the sounds of video games and Emma's occasional giggles. As we pulled up in front of Pierre and Marie's stately home, I took a deep breath. Sophie shook my hand. "It's going to be all right," she murmured, as much to herself as to me. Pierre greeted us at the door, his eternally warm smile on his lips. "Ah, here's the little family," he exclaimed, taking Emma in his arms. Lucas, at the age of 8, contented himself with a nonchalant hi grandpa before making his way into the living room. Marie appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gaze lingered on my casual shirt and jeans. I saw a shadow of disapproval pass over her face, but she quickly pulled herself together. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The living room was impeccable as always, every knick-knack in its place, every cushion perfectly positioned. Lucas had already settled down in front of the TV, flipping between channels. "Lucas, turn that off and come and help us set the table," Marie ordered. The boy reluctantly obeyed. While Sophie helped her mother in the kitchen, I found myself alone with Pierre in the living room. He handed me a glass of red wine. "So, Antoine, how's business?" he asked politely. I took a sip before answering. It's okay. I've got a few interesting projects at the moment." Pierre nodded, but I could see that he didn't really understand what I was doing. For him, as for Marie, a job meant an office, fixed hours and, above all, job security. Dinner was served shortly afterwards. Marie had prepared a bœuf bourguignon, my favorite dish, which gave me hope that the evening would go well. We settled down around the table, the children arguing over who would sit next to whom. The conversation began on light topics: the children's school, the latest neighborhood gossip, vacation plans. I began to relax, thinking that maybe, for once, we could have a tension-free dinner. It was then that Marie turned to me. "And you, Antoine, still at home?" I felt Sophie stiffen beside me. "Yes, I still work from home," I replied calmly. "That's the advantage of being freelance." Marie pursed her lips. And does it pay, this work at home?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, it pays. We manage to live comfortably." "Comfortably," interjected Pierre. "Yet your car looks like it needs changing." I felt anger welling up inside me, but I tried to remain calm. "We have other priorities at the moment. The car's running fine." Marie put down her fork. "Any priorities? Like what?" "Spending your days in your pajamas in front of a computer while Sophie toils away at the hospital?" Silence fell over the table. Even the children stopped eating, sensing the tension rising. "Maman," began Sophie, but Marie interrupted her with a gesture. "No, Sophie, someone has to tell the truth. Antoine, you studied brilliantly, you had a good job in a big company. And you gave it all up for what? To play on the computer all day?" I clenched my fists under the table. "I'm not playing, Marie. I'm working. Just because I don't wear a suit and spend 2 hours a day in transit doesn't mean I don't work hard." Marie snorted with disdain. "Working hard? You call that hard work? Sophie comes home exhausted every night after saving lives, and you, that's enough." Sophie struck the table with the flat of her hand, startling everyone. "Mom, I forbid you to talk to Antoine like that. He works hard, even if you can't see it." A heavy silence settled in. The children looked at us in turn, wide-eyed. Emma began to cry softly. I stood up slowly. I think we'd better leave, I said in a calm but firm voice. Sophie nodded and stood up in turn. Yes, that's better. Come on, Emma, let's go home. As we headed for the door, I heard Marie mutter, a real parasite, that's what he is. I froze in place, my hand on the door handle. Sophie looked at me in horror. Even Pierre seemed shocked by his wife's words. I turned slowly, staring Marie straight in the eye. You don't know anything about my work, Marie. You don't know anything at all. And maybe that's for the best. With that, we left the house, leaving behind a deafening silence. In the car, Sophie burst into tears as I tried to calm the children. That dinner was a turning point. I knew that things would never be the same again with my in-laws. But what they didn't know was that I was about to prove them wrong about me. If only they knew. The return journey was made in a heavy silence, interspersed only by Sophie's sniffles and the children's worried questions. Why was Grandma so angry? Asked Emma in a small voice. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, unable to answer. Once home, we quickly put the children to bed. Sophie collapsed on the sofa, visibly exhausted by the confrontation. I sat down beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry, she murmured. I didn't think my mother would go this far. I sighed deeply. It's not your fault, Sophie. Your mother always had a hard time with my career choice. We stayed like that for a while, lost in thought, before going to bed ourselves. I slept badly that night, Marie's words echoing in my head, sang sugar parasita. The next morning, I got up early, determined not to let the previous day's incident affect my productivity. I settled into my makeshift office in the corner of the living room, my laptop in front of me, ready to dive into the code for my latest project. Sophie emerged from the bedroom around 8 o'clock, her eyes still swollen with sleep and tears. She approached me and placed a kiss on my cheek. Did you sleep well? She asked softly. I shrugged. I'm fine. How about you? She shook her head. Not really. I can't stop thinking about last night. Maybe I should call Mom and... I interrupted gently. Sophie, it's not your place to apologize for her. Give her time to think about what she said. Sophie nodded, unconvinced, and went to wake the children for school. The morning passed quickly, between breakfast, the preparation of school bags and Sophie's departure for the hospital. I found myself alone, immersed in my work. Around noon, as I was taking a break to make myself a sandwich, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophie. Mom wants to have an apology dinner tonight. She's invited the whole family. What do you think? I stared at the screen, torn between the urge to refuse outright and the desire to maintain family peace. After a few minutes' thought, I replied, all right, but on one condition, that she promises not to broach the subject of my work. Sophie's reply was quick. She's agreed. We'll meet at their place at 7 p.m. The rest of the day passed as if in a fog. I found it hard to concentrate on my work, anxiously anticipating the evening ahead. At 6 p.m., I closed my computer and went to get ready. This time, I decided to put on a shirt and tie, hoping it would calm Marie down a little. Sophie returned shortly afterwards with the children. She seemed nervous but optimistic. It's going to be fine, she said as she adjusted my tie. Mom promised to make an effort. We arrived at my in-laws' house at 7 p.m. sharp. The house was busier than the day before, with voices and laughter coming from the garden. Apparently, Marie really had invited the whole family. Pierre greeted us at the door, looking embarrassed. Come in, he said, avoiding my gaze. Everyone's in the garden. We crossed the house to the garden. About 10 people were present, Sophie's brothers and sisters with their spouses and children, as well as a few cousins. All fell silent as we arrived, creating an awkward silence. Marie approached us, a tense smile on her lips. Antoine, Sophie, I'm glad you could come, she said in a strained voice. I hope we can have a pleasant evening. I nodded, striving to remain polite. Thank you for the invitation, Marie. Conversation gradually resumed, but I could feel the curious looks on their faces. Clearly, the previous day's incident had been the subject of much family discussion. Dinner was served on the large garden table. I found myself seated between Sophie and her cousin Paul, a corporate lawyer who had always had a weakness for family gossip. "So, Antoine," Paul began between bites, "I hear you're working from home now. Must be nice to be able to sleep in every day, huh?" I felt Sophie tense up beside me. I took a deep breath before calmly replying, "Actually, Paul, I usually get up very early to work. Freelancing requires a lot of discipline." Paul chuckled condescendingly. "Really? And you manage to earn a living like that?" I was about to reply when Marie intervened from across the table. "Paul, we agreed not to talk about Antoine's work tonight." An awkward silence settled in. I saw several people exchange glances, and I suddenly realized that everyone knew about the previous day's argument. The tension was palpable. It was then that Marie stood up, her glass in hand. "In fact," she said in a loud voice, drawing everyone's attention, "I think it's time we talked openly about the situation." Sophie gave me a panicked look. I felt my heart quicken, dreading what was to come. Marie took a deep breath before continuing. "Last night, I said some things I regret. I called Antoine a parasite." A murmur ran through the assembly. I stared at my plate, wishing I could disappear underground. "But," Marie continued, "I still think there's a problem. Antoine, you're an intelligent, capable man. You had a good job, a promising career. And now you spend your days at home while my daughter works hard at the hospital. How can you think that's acceptable?" The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes were on me, waiting for my reaction. Sophie had tears in her eyes, torn between anger at her mother and embarrassment at the situation. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of all those stares on my shoulders. "Marie," I began in a voice I wanted to be firm, but which trembled slightly, "I understand your concern. But you know nothing of my work, my plans, my ambitions." Marie sniffed dismissively. "Any plans? Ambitions? You spend your days in your pajamas in front of a computer. How dare you call that work?" It was then that something inside me snapped. All the frustration, all the anger I'd built up over the last few months suddenly exploded. "How dare I?" I repeated, my voice rising in volume. "How dare you judge work you don't understand? Yes, I work from home. Yes, I spend my days in front of a computer. But do you know what I do? Do you know the hours I spend coding, solving complex problems, creating innovative solutions?" The garden was plunged into stony silence. Even the children, sensing the tension, had stopped playing. "You think I'm a parasite," continued I, unable to stop now that the floodgates were open. "You think I take advantage of Sophie? Let me tell you something, Marie. I work hard, maybe harder than I ever did in my real job as you call it. And one day, very soon, you'll understand how wrong you've been about me." With that, I threw my napkin on the table and headed for the exit. Sophie rose to follow me, but I stopped her with a gesture. "Stay with the kids," I said softly. "I'll walk home. I need some fresh air." As I walked through the garden gate, I heard Marie's voice behind me. "See? This is exactly what I was talking about. A true Sangsugar parasita, unable to face reality." These words followed me as I walked through the dark streets, wondering how I was going to repair the damage caused by this disastrous evening. The journey home seemed interminable. Marie's words were still ringing in my ears, mingling with the sound of my footsteps on the sidewalk. Night had fallen, and the street lamps cast flickering shadows on the facades of the sleeping houses. I needed this moment of solitude to gather my thoughts and reflect on the situation. Arriving home, I headed straight for my office. My computer screen glowed softly in the darkness, like a beacon in the night. I sat down heavily in my chair and stared at the screen for long minutes, lost in thought. What Marie and the rest of the family didn't know was that for months I'd been working on a project that could change my life, our life. A project that kept me up at night and made me skip meals. A project that, if successful, would prove to everyone that I'd been right to quit my real job and go freelance. I clicked on an encrypted folder on my desktop and entered a long password. The folder opened, revealing hundreds of files, lines of code, diagrams and notes. It had been there, in front of them all along, and yet no one could see it. 6 months ago, I was contacted by a major technology company, TechVision, known for its innovations in artificial intelligence. They were looking for a developer capable of working on a top-secret project, revolutionary AI software that could analyze and predict market trends with never-before-seen accuracy. The project was ambitious, risky, but potentially revolutionary, and they had chosen me to carry it out. The contract came with a strict confidentiality clause. I couldn't tell anyone about it, not even Sophie. This was the sine qua non condition for participating in the project. I accepted without hesitation. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance to prove my worth as an independent developer. But I hadn't anticipated the challenges it would pose in my personal life. Day after day, I worked hard on the project. While Sophie was away at the hospital, I'd lock myself in my office, immersed in complex lines of code. When she returned in the evening, exhausted after a long day, I would pretend to have spent the day looking for new contracts or working on minor projects. The lie weighed on me, but I kept telling myself it was for a good cause. Once the project was finished, everything would change. We could finally have the life we'd always dreamed of. But as time went by, the pressure increased. Deadlines were looming, and I had to redouble my efforts to meet the targets set by TechVision. I was sleeping little, eating poorly, and my relationship with Sophie was suffering. She couldn't understand why I was so distant, so preoccupied. And I couldn't tell her. It was against this backdrop that tensions with my in-laws began to mount. They saw me staying at home all day, not understanding the amount of work I was secretly doing. To them, I had become the lazy son-in-law, taking advantage of his wife's hard work. And now, after that disastrous evening, here I was, alone in my office, staring at the screen containing the fruit of all my efforts. The project was almost complete. Only a few more days, and I could finally reveal the truth to everyone. I heard the front door open and close softly. Sophie had returned. I quickly closed the project file and turned towards the office door. Sophie appeared in the frame, looking exhausted and worried. "Antoine," she said softly, "we need to talk." I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and incomprehension. "I don't understand what's going on," she began. "You've changed in the last few months. You've been distant, preoccupied. And now this argument with my family. Antoine, what's wrong?" I took a deep breath. I was tempted, so tempted to tell him everything. To tell him about the project, about the incredible opportunity we had. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. "Not yet. Sophie," I said, taking her hands in mine, "I know these last few months have been difficult. I know you don't understand everything that's going on. But I promise you, I swear it's all going to work out very soon." She looked at me, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "How can you be so sure? Antoine, I feel like I'm losing you. My family thinks you're a parasite. And sometimes I wonder if they're not right." The words struck me like a blow. I let go of his hands and stood up, pacing the small room. "You really think that?" asked I, my voice trembling with anger and pain. "After all we've been through together, you think I'm a parasite?" Sophie shook her head sharply. No, that's not what I meant. It's just that. I don't understand, Antoine. I don't understand why you spend your days locked up in here, why you don't talk to me like you used to. What exactly do you do?" I stopped walking and looked at her. She looked so vulnerable, so lost. I wanted to take her in my arms and explain everything to her. But I couldn't. I just couldn't yet. "Sophie," I said softly, "I know it's hard to understand, but I'm asking you to trust me. Just a few more days, and everything will become clear. I promise you that everything I do for us, for our family." She looked at me for a long time, searching my eyes for an answer I couldn't give her. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said in a whisper. "I trust you, Antoine. But please don't leave me out. I need to feel like we're still a team." I sat down next to her and took her in my arms. "We're a team," I whispered into her hair. "Always." That night, as Sophie slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The project was so close to completion. Only a few more days, and I could finally reveal the truth. I could show everyone, Sophie, Marie, the whole family, that I'd been right to follow this path. The next morning, I got up early, determined to finish the project once and for all. I kissed Sophie, still asleep, on the forehead and headed for my office. The screen lit up, revealing the fruit of months of hard work. As I plunged into the last few lines of code, a growing sense of excitement came over me. I was about to create something extraordinary, something that could change the world of technology. And nobody, not even my own family, had a clue. I worked tirelessly all day, ignoring hunger, fatigue, and Sophie's messages asking me if everything was all right. I was in my own bubble, focused solely on the screen in front of me. And then, as the sun began to set, I typed the last line of code. I stood still for a long moment, not daring to believe it. It was done. The project was finished. With trembling hands, I launched the final test program. The screen filled with data, graphs, and complex analyses. And everything worked perfectly. The AI software I had created was capable of analyzing and predicting market trends with astounding accuracy. A nervous laugh escaped me. I'd done it. I'd really done it. Just then, I heard the front door open. Sophie had returned. I quickly closed the program and stood up. It was time to tell her the truth. With my heart beating wildly, I stood in my study, my eyes riveted to the door. I could hear Sophie packing her things in the hallway, her light footsteps echoing through our little apartment. The moment I'd been dreading and waiting for had finally arrived. It was time to make a crucial decision, reveal my secret or keep it to myself. Antoine. Sophie's voice drew me from my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, looking tired but worried. Are you all right? You look weird. I took a deep breath. Sophie, we need to talk. It's important. She frowned, entering the room. What's the matter? You're scaring me. I invited her to sit down on the little sofa we'd set up in my office. My hands trembled slightly as I sat down beside her. Sophie, I began, my throat tightening. Remember when I decided to go freelance? You supported me, even though everyone thought it was crazy. She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. Of course, I remember. I've always trusted you, Antoine. Those words hurt. Trust. That was exactly what I'd betrayed these past few months. I took his hands in mine, searching for the courage to continue. There's something I haven't told you. Something important. I paused, searching for my words. 6 months ago, I was contacted by TechVision. They wanted me to work on a secret project. A revolutionary artificial intelligence project. Sophie's eyes widened. TechVision? But that's huge. Why didn't you tell me about it? I lowered my eyes, ashamed. I couldn't. The contract included an absolute confidentiality clause. I couldn't tell anyone, not even you. That was the condition for participating in the project. A heavy silence settled over the room. I could almost hear the cogs turning in Sophie's mind, assimilating this new information. So, she said slowly, all those months when I thought you were desperate for work, when my family called you a parasite, you were actually working on a top-secret project for one of the biggest tech companies in the world. I nodded, unable to speak. Sophie stood up abruptly, pacing the small room. I can't believe it, she murmured. Why didn't you tell me? We're married, Antoine. We're supposed to share everything. Guilt gnawed at me. I know, Sophie. I know I should have told you. But I was afraid. Afraid of losing this opportunity, afraid of disappointing you if it didn't work out. She stopped walking and stared at me. What about now? Why are you telling me now? I stood up in turn, walking over to my computer. Because it's finished. I finished the project today. And it's incredible, Sophie. What we've created could change the world of technology. I clicked a few keys, opening the program I'd spent months developing. The screen lit up with complex graphics and real-time data. Sophie approached, fascinated despite herself. What exactly is this? It's AI software capable of analyzing and predicting market trends with an accuracy never seen before, I explained, a hint of pride in my voice. It could revolutionize the world of finance, economics, strategic planning. Sophie remained silent for a long moment, watching the screen. Then she turned to me, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "Antoine, it's incredible. But why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have understood, I would have kept it a secret." I sighed deeply. I know. I was stupid. I was so afraid of ruining everything that I ended up jeopardizing the most important thing to me, our relationship. Sophie sat down heavily on the sofa, visibly upset. "Now what? What happens now?" I sat down next to her, taking her hands in mine. "This is where I need your help, Sophie. I've finished the project, but I haven't informed TechVision yet. I'm hesitating." She looked at me, surprised. "Are you hesitating? Why?" I stood up, unable to sit still. "Because if I send this project to TechVision, it won't belong to me anymore. They'll have all the rights, all the profits. Sure, I'll get paid, probably very well paid. But it won't be yours anymore," Sophie finishes for me. I nodded. "Exactly. And I wonder, what if I kept this project to myself? What if I created my own company around this technology? It would be risky, of course, but the potential is enormous." Sophie remained silent for a long moment, thinking. I could almost see the thoughts swirling around in her mind. "Antoine," she finally says, "do you realize that if you do this, you'll be violating your contract with TechVision? They could sue you." I swallow hard. I know. That's why I'm hesitating. That's why I need your advice. Sophie stood up and came to stand in front of me. "Antoine, I love you. I believe in you and your talent. But I can't make this decision for you. It's your job, your project. You have to decide for yourself what's best." I looked at her, grateful for her support but still torn. What if I decided to keep the project? To take that risk? She took my face in her hands. "Then I'll be by your side, whatever happens. But Antoine, think hard. Is it really worth risking everything we've built?" His words resonated within me. I turned to my computer screen, looking at the fruit of my labor. It was my masterpiece, the result of months of relentless effort. But was it really mine? I closed my eyes, trying to sort out my thoughts. On the one hand, there was the security of handing over the project to TechVision, of receiving a substantial reward for my work, of perhaps even landing a prestigious position within the company. On the other, there was the dream of creating something that would truly belong to me, of building my own company, of changing the world in my own way. But there were also risks. The possibility of a lawsuit, the loss of my professional reputation, the jeopardizing of our financial stability. And then there was my family, Sophie, who had already sacrificed so much to support me. I opened my eyes again, looking at Sophie. She was waiting patiently, giving me time to think. "I believe," I said slowly, "that I must honor my contract with TechVision." Sophie nodded, a mixture of relief and pride in her eyes. "I think it's the right decision, Antoine." I turned to my computer, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. This was the moment of truth. I opened my email client and began drafting a message to my contact at TechVision, telling them that the project was finished and ready for delivery. Just as I was about to press send, Sophie put her hand on my shoulder. "Hold on," she said. "There's one more thing we need to do first." I looked at her, puzzled. "What's that?" She smiled, a twinkle of mischief in her eyes. "Call my mother and tell her the truth." I couldn't help laughing, despite the tension of the moment. "You're right. It's time to set things straight with your family." I picked up my phone and dialed Marie's number, my heart pounding. As the tone rang, I realized that whatever happened now, I'd made the right decision. I had chosen honesty, legality, and above all, I had chosen my family. The phone picked up. "Hello." Marie's voice rang out on the other end of the line. I took a deep breath. "Marie? It's Antoine. We need to talk." "Marie? It's Antoine. We need to talk." My voice trembled slightly as I spoke the words. Sophie was beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder in a sign of support. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost feel the tension rising through the receiver. Finally, Marie answered in a cold voice, "Antoine, to what do I owe this honor?" I took a deep breath. "Marie, I know things have been difficult between us lately. But there's something you need to know. Something important. I'm listening, she said, her tone betraying a mixture of curiosity and distrust. I looked at Sophie, who nodded in encouragement. So, for the last 6 months, I've been working on a secret project for TechVision. That's why I've been spending so much time at home, in front of my computer. It wasn't out of laziness or lack of ambition, but because I was developing revolutionary artificial intelligence software. There was another long silence. I could almost hear the cogs turning in Marie's mind, trying to assimilate this unexpected information. TechVision, she finally repeated, disbelief evident in her voice. The technology company? Yes, exactly, I confirmed. They contacted me 6 months ago to work on a top-secret project. I couldn't tell anyone about it because of a strict confidentiality clause in my contract. And this project, Marie said slowly, what exactly is it about? I took a deep breath before launching into the explanation. It's artificial intelligence software capable of analyzing and predicting market trends with unprecedented accuracy. It could revolutionize the world of finance, economics, strategic planning. As I spoke, detailing the technical aspects of the project, the revolutionary nature of the software, I sensed a subtle change in Marie's attitude. Her silence was no longer hostile, but attentive, almost impressed. Antoine, she finally said when I'd finished my explanation, I don't know what to say. It's unbelievable. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you, Marie. I know these last few months have been difficult for everyone. I wish I could have been honest sooner, but I hope you understand now why I acted the way I did. There was another silence, then Marie said in a strangely soft voice, I understand, Antoine. And I must apologize for the way I've treated you. I've been unfair to you. These words took me by surprise. I looked at Sophie, who seemed just as surprised as I was. Thank you, Marie, I said sincerely. It means a lot to me. Could you come to dinner tonight? Asked Marie suddenly. You and Sophie? I'd like us to talk about this in person. And I think the rest of the family should hear this story, too. I glanced at Sophie, who nodded with a smile. We'll be there, I replied. After hanging up, Sophie gave me a hug. I'm proud of you, she whispered. You did the right thing. A few hours later, we found ourselves at the front door of my in-laws' house. The atmosphere was strangely different from our previous visits. There was a tension in the air, but also a kind of anticipation. Marie opened the door for us, her expression indecipherable. Come in, she said simply. In the living room, we found Pierre and Sophie's siblings. They all looked at us with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Good, said Marie once we were all settled. Antoine has something to tell us. All eyes turned to me. I felt my throat tighten, but the reassuring touch of Sophie's hand on mine gave me courage. I began my story, explaining how TechVision had contacted me, the nature of the project, the confidentiality constraints. As I spoke, I could see the expressions around me change. Disbelief gave way to fascination, then to a kind of respect. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then, against all expectations, it was Paul, the lawyer cousin always quick to criticize, who spoke first. Antoine, he said slowly, I have to admit I'm impressed. What you've accomplished, it's remarkable. The others nodded, murmuring their agreement. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Marie then stood up, drawing everyone's attention. Antoine, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I owe you an apology. A sincere and profound apology. I doubted you, I judged you unfairly, and I treated you in an unforgivable way. I looked at her, stunned by this reversal. Marie, She raised a hand to interrupt me. No, let me finish. I was blinded by my prejudices, by my narrow vision of what a successful career should be. I failed to see beyond appearances, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. I saw tears shining in Sophie's eyes. I accept your apology, Marie, I said finally. And I hope we can make a fresh start. She nodded, a small smile on her lips. I'd like that very much, Antoine. The rest of the evening was spent in a completely different atmosphere to what we'd experienced in recent months. The family was curious, asking questions about my work, about TechVision, about the future of technology. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly accepted and respected. As we were about to leave, Marie took me aside. "Antoine," she said softly, "I wanted to tell you. I'm proud to have you as my son-in-law. You've proved yourself to be a man of principle, hardworking and talented. Sophie is lucky to have you." These words touched me more than I could have imagined. "Thank you, Marie," I replied, my voice tight with emotion. On the way home, Sophie and I remained silent, still reeling from the evening's events. It wasn't until we got home that Sophie turned to me, her eyes shining. "You've done it, Antoine," she says. "You've not only created something incredible, but you've also managed to change the perception of my whole family. I'm so proud of you." I hugged her, overwhelmed by a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. "I could never have done it without your support," I murmured. That night, as we lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened in the last few months. The challenges, the doubts, the moments of despair, but also the determination, the hard work, and finally, the recognition. The next morning, I woke up early, energized. I switched on my computer and opened my mailbox. It was time to officially inform TechVision that the project was finished. As I began to type the email, I realized that this wasn't just the end of a project. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I could finally be proud of who I was and what I'd accomplished. I glanced at the photo of Sophie and me on my desk, then at the screen displaying the fruits of my labor. I had managed to reconcile my passion for technology with my love for my family. And that, perhaps, was my greatest achievement. With a smile, I clicked on send. Whatever the future held for me, I was ready to face it with my head held high and my heart light. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling of lightness I hadn't felt in months. The weight of the secret I'd been carrying had finally lifted, and reconciliation with my in-laws had brought me unexpected relief. I got ready quickly, eager to start this new day which marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Sophie had already left for work at the hospital, but she had left me a note on the kitchen table. "I'm so proud of you. Good luck today. Love you." Those simple words filled me with joy and determination. I sat down at my desk, ready to begin the final stages of my project with TechVision. I opened my mailbox, expecting to find an enthusiastic response to my message of the previous day announcing the completion of the project. But to my surprise, my inbox was empty. No reply from TechVision. "They probably need some time to examine the project," I said to myself to reassure myself. I decided to dive into the project documentation while waiting for their reply. Hours went by, and still nothing. Worry began to gnaw at me. What if something had gone wrong? What if the project hadn't lived up to their expectations? Around noon, just as I was starting to get seriously worried, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't know. I picked it up, my heart pounding. "Hello, Antoine Dupont speaking," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Monsieur Dupont," replied a deep voice I didn't recognize. "This is Maître Lefevre, lawyer representing TechVision. I regret to inform you that we have discovered an information leak concerning the project you were working on." My blood ran cold through my veins. A leak? How could it be possible? I don't understand," I stammered. "What leak are you talking about?" "Details of the project were published on several tech forums this morning," the lawyer explained dryly. "Information that should never have left the walls of TechVision. You understand that this is a serious breach of your confidentiality agreement." My mind was racing. How could this have happened? I'd only told Sophie and my in-laws about the project, and I knew that none of them would. Suddenly, a memory struck me. The family dinner. Paul, the lawyer cousin, asking so many questions about the technical details of the project. Had he? "Monsieur Dupont." The lawyer's voice brought me back to reality. "Are you still there?" Yes, I replied, my throat tight. "I assure you I haven't divulged anything publicly. There must be some mistake." "Mistake or not, TechVision is taking this matter very seriously," continued Maître Lefevre. We are considering legal action for breach of contract and disclosure of confidential information. My world was crumbling around me. Everything I'd worked so hard for, everything I'd sacrificed, was about to be wiped out. Please, I said, my voice trembling, give me a chance to explain. I can fix this. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You have 24 hours to provide a satisfactory explanation, the lawyer finally said. After that time, we will begin legal proceedings. Communication was cut off, leaving me alone with my growing panic. What was I to do? How could I prove my innocence? My hands trembled as I dialed Sophie's number. She picked up on the third ring. Antoine, is everything all right? His worried voice only heightened my anxiety. Sophie, I said, struggling to keep my composure, we have a problem. A big problem. I quickly explained the situation. His silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Oh my God, Antoine, she said finally. What are we going to do? I don't know, I admitted. But I need to find out who leaked this information. I think it might be Paul. Paul, exclaimed Sophie. My cousin. But why would he do that? I don't know, I replied. But he was asking a lot of questions last night. Very specific questions about the technical aspects of the project. Sophie remained silent for a moment. All right, she said finally. I'll try to contact him. You concentrate on preparing your defense for TechVision. We'll get through this, Antoine. Together. His words comforted me a little, but the fear never left me. After hanging up, I frantically began to gather all the evidence I could find to prove that I hadn't divulged the information. The hours passed in a blur of anxiety and hard work. I compiled logs, message histories, anything that could prove my innocence. But deep down, I knew it might not be enough. Around 6 p.m., just as I was on the verge of exhaustion, my phone rang again. It was Sophie. Antoine, she said, her voice betraying a mixture of relief and concern, I've spoken to Paul. My heart leapt. So, it was definitely him, she confirmed. He confessed to sharing information on tech forums this morning. He didn't think it would have such consequences. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by a mixture of relief and anger. Why? Why did he do that? Sophie sighed. He said he wanted to impress his colleagues, show he had connections in the tech world. He didn't realize the importance of confidentiality. I shook my head in disbelief. My whole career, my whole future, jeopardized by a thoughtless boast. What do we do now? I asked. Paul's on his way, Sophie replied. He wants to talk to you in person, apologize and see how he can make things right. An hour later, Paul was sitting in our living room, looking downcast and ashamed. He apologized, with tears in his eyes, explaining that he had never meant to cause any harm. I'm a lawyer, he says. I should know better than anyone the importance of confidentiality. I'm so sorry, Antoine. Despite my anger, I couldn't help feeling a certain compassion for him. We've all made mistakes, after all. Paul, I said finally, I understand that you didn't want to cause any trouble. But now we have to find a way to repair the damage. He nodded vigorously. Of course, I'll do whatever it takes. I can write a statement, take full responsibility for the leak. I'll testify if necessary. We spent the next few hours strategizing. Paul wrote a detailed statement explaining how he had obtained the information and why he had shared it, taking full responsibility for the leak. The next morning, armed with Paul's statement and all the evidence I'd gathered, I contacted Maître Lefevre. The call lasted almost an hour, during which I explained in detail what had happened, providing all the evidence of my innocence. There was a long silence on the other end of the line when I finished. Then, finally, the lawyer spoke. Mr. Dupont, in light of this new information, TechVision is ready to reconsider its position. We will carefully review Mr. Paul's statement and your evidence. For the time being, we are suspending all legal action against you. I let out a sigh of relief. It wasn't over yet, but it was a start. The days that followed were tense, filled with calls to TechVision's lawyers and long discussions with Paul and my family. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we received the news. TechVision had decided not to pursue legal action against me. However, the damage had been done. The leak had compromised the revolutionary nature of the project, and TechVision decided to put it on indefinite hold. My contract was terminated, with financial compensation for the work carried out, but well below what I could have hoped for had the project been completed. Sitting in our living room, Sophie by my side, I contemplated the uncertain future that lay ahead. On the one hand, I was relieved to have avoided a legal catastrophe. On the other, I couldn't help feeling a deep sense of disappointment. "What are we going to do now?" asked Sophie softly. I took his hand in mine, reflecting on our situation. Despite everything that had happened, despite the loss of this project that should have been the fulfillment of my career, I realized that I had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty and trust in family and professional relationships. "We're going to move forward," I finally replied. "This project may have been a missed opportunity, but it's not the end. I've acquired valuable skills, I've proved what I'm capable of. Maybe this is the chance to start my own business, to create something that really belongs to me." Sophie squeezed my hand, an encouraging smile on her lips. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here to support you. We'll get through this together." As we sat there, hand in hand, I realized that despite all the challenges and setbacks, I had gained something far more valuable than any contract: the unconditional support of my family and a new perspective on what really mattered in life. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it with optimism and determination. The weeks following the resolution of the TechVision deal were difficult. I found myself without a plan, without a clear direction, and with a persistent feeling of failure. Despite Sophie's unwavering support and the newfound understanding of my in-laws, I couldn't help brooding over what might have been. One morning, as I was absent-mindedly browsing online job offers, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't know. "Hello," I replied, without much enthusiasm. "Monsieur Dupont." A feminine voice, professional but warm. "I'm Clara Moreau, Director of Innovation at Innovatech. I've heard about your work on predictive AI for TechVision." My heart skipped a beat. How did she know? Yes, it's me," I stammered. "But how?" "It's a small tech world, Monsieur Dupont," she replied with a chuckle. "News travels fast, especially when it comes to a project as promising as yours." I remained silent, not knowing what to say. The project was supposed to be confidential, even after the leak. "Don't worry," she continued, as if reading my mind. "We're aware of the difficulties you've encountered. But what we're interested in is your talent and vision." "I'm listening," I said, curiosity getting the better of my distrust. "We'd like to meet with you to discuss a potential collaboration. Your approach to predictive AI fits perfectly with a project we're currently developing." My mind was racing. Was this a second chance? An opportunity to pick up where I'd been forced to leave off? "I'd be delighted to chat with you," I replied, trying to contain my excitement. We arranged to meet the next day at Innovatech. That night, I barely slept, my mind full of possibilities and apprehensions. The next morning, I went to Innovatech's headquarters, an imposing glass and steel building in the heart of La Défense. I was greeted by Clara Moreau herself, a dynamic-looking woman in her 50s with a warm smile. "Monsieur Dupont, welcome," she said, shaking my hand. "Follow me, we have much to discuss." She led me into a conference room where two other people were waiting for us, a man in his 60s with grey hair and a piercing gaze, and a young woman with red hair and bright eyes. "This is Jean Lefebvre, our CEO," Clara introduced, "and Emily Rousseau, our AI research manager." After the usual introductions, Jean Lefebvre took the floor. "Mr. Dupont, we've been following your work from afar, and we're impressed. What you've accomplished with TechVision, even if the project didn't come to fruition, shows enormous potential." I nodded, not sure how to respond. "Here's what we're proposing," he continued. "We want you to join our team to lead a new predictive AI project. But not just in finance. We want to apply this technology to a more crucial area." Emily Rousseau took over. "We're working on an AI project capable of predicting and preventing natural disasters. Imagine being able to accurately anticipate earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. We think your approach could be the key to taking this project to the next level." I was stunned. It was much more than I had expected. It wasn't just a career opportunity, it was a chance to do something that could really change the world. It's unbelievable," I said finally. "But why me? My project with TechVision hasn't even been completed." Clara smiles, "Because we're not just looking for technical skills, Monsieur Dupont. We're looking for someone with vision, perseverance, and the ability to bounce back from adversity. You've proven that you have all these qualities." We spent the next few hours discussing the details of the project, my potential role, the resources that would be made available to me. The more I learned, the more excited I became about the possibilities. At the end of the meeting, Jean Lefebvre handed me an envelope. "Here's our official offer. Please take the time to think about it, to discuss it with your family. We understand that this is an important decision." I returned home in a daze, my mind swirling with ideas and possibilities. Sophie was waiting for me, anxious to know the outcome of the meeting. When I told him everything, his eyes widened with surprise and excitement. "Antoine, this is incredible. This is exactly the opportunity you deserve." We spent the evening discussing the implications of this offer. The salary was more than generous, the working conditions excellent, and the project itself exciting. But above all, it was a chance to do something really meaningful. The next day, I called Clara to accept the offer. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity, signing contracts, moving to a new office, meeting my team. The project was making great strides. My experience with the TechVision project proved invaluable, enabling me to bring crucial innovations to Innovateka's predictive AI system. 6 months after my arrival, we had our first major breakthrough. Our system accurately predicted an earthquake in Indonesia 3 days before it occurred, enabling local authorities to evacuate at-risk areas and save thousands of lives. The news went round the world. Suddenly, Innovateka was in the spotlight, and our team was being celebrated as heroes. One evening, as I was coming home late from the office, exhausted but exhilarated by our recent successes, I found Sophie waiting for me with a big smile on her face. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, kissing me. I nodded, still stunned by the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. "I'm so proud of you, Antoine," she says, giving me a hug. "You turned a failure into something incredible. You save lives." His words hit me hard. I'd been so caught up in work that I hadn't really taken the time to realize the impact of what we were doing. The following weekend, we organized a big family dinner. Everyone was there, my parents, Sophie's parents, her brothers and sisters, and even Paul, who had redeemed himself by helping me negotiate my contract with Innovateka. As we all sat around the table, Marie stood up, glass in hand. "I'd like to propose a toast," she says, drawing everyone's attention. "To Antoine." I felt my cheeks flush as all eyes turned to me. "Antoine," Marie continued, "a year ago I called you a parasite. I was wrong, so wrong. You're not a parasite, you're a visionary. You've been through things that many would have considered insurmountable, and you've come out stronger. You've created something that saves lives, that changes the world. We're all so proud of you." Tears welled up in my eyes as everyone raised their glasses. I looked around the table, seeing the love and pride in my family's eyes, and realized how lucky I was. Later that evening, as the guests began to leave, I found myself alone with Paul on the terrace. "You know," he says, looking up at the stars, "I still feel guilty about what happened with TechVision." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Paul, without that incident, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. Sometimes what seems to be our greatest failure can become our greatest opportunity." He looked at me, surprised, then smiled. "You're right. Who knew my stupidity would end up saving lives?" We laughed together, savoring the sweet irony of the situation. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sophie, I thought about everything that had happened since that famous dinner where Marie had called me a parasite. It had been a long and difficult road, but every test, every obstacle had led me exactly where I needed to be. I realized that success wasn't just about hard work or talent. It was also about resilience, the ability to bounce back from adversity, and above all, having people who believe in you, even when you doubt yourself. As I closed my eyes, ready to fall asleep, I was filled with a deep sense of gratitude. For Sophie, for my family, for the opportunities that had come my way. And above all, for the most important lesson I had learned: sometimes, our greatest challenges can become our greatest strengths. The future was bright, filled with infinite possibilities. And I was ready to face it, no longer as a would-be parasite, but as the man I had become, an innovator, a lifesaver, and above all, someone who never gave up, no matter what obstacles stood in his way.